1951 schoolhouse. And the original school was the size of this room. There was no front and there was no kitchen. And we have the plans, the written plans in 1851 where a committee sat down and designated everything they were building. And the schoolroom was gonna be upstairs, but there was no staircase mentioned in the plan, so we still don't know how they got up there. But in about 1890, I think they added that back. In the 1960s, a group of local folks built the kitchen. And in 2000, we looked out our window upstairs and looked at the floor, at the roof of the kitchen and said, oh, it would make a nice office. So we built an office on top of the kitchen. So we've done quite a few changes to the building. What else do we want to do?
What were they going to do to this building? What was some of the
Well,
plans?
the town had a plan to sell it and get rid of it, because it was in pretty bad shape and they were afraid it would collapse. And so they got an architect to look at it and said it was $650,000 to repair it. And the town said, well, we can't do that. And so some people went to the selectmen and got pretty upset about it. Because we had our whole historical archive upstairs. All the town's history is upstairs. Where are we supposed to put it? So in the end, we bought it from the town for $1, along with that $650,000 thing. Well, we raised half that much, which was a miracle, and it was enough money to fix it. So this is what we now have. It's beams, steel beams, so it won't collapse, and a real bathroom.
Good water.
What else?
New floor,
Good water,
new painting.
floor, kitchen, all the windows,
Paved parking lot.
paved parking lot, new roof, yeah, good. Sewer hookup.
Yeah.
So,
What was the average population for the students? How many students were in the classroom?
there were about around 40, grades 1 to 8, and upstairs are pictures of the teacher with grades 1 to 8, and they're all sitting there. I think it's 1938. The school closed in 47. All the one-room schools in town closed in 1947, and they built the consolidated school, which was a 4-room school in the center. And that's the site of today's big school, which resembles nothing like that.
And the renovations are half of what they wanted.
Yes, yes, they did, it was half of it. So anyway, that's what we're doing, and we work every Friday morning. We have a group that meets upstairs, and we come up with projects that we're doing, sessioning all the archived material. That's it.
Time's up. Well, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you taking off the Friday night. I know Rawhide's coming on, but you should be able to get back and see Rawhide before then. But anyway, this is Nate and Tucker, and so to start off, we're going to be interviewing these gentlemen, and but to start off, if you pick up this paper, let's put them in the spirit here. This is music from World War I, right here. So go to the first page. I'm gonna need you now to sing. Over there, over there.
Send the word, over there. The Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drums are running everywhere. So from there, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, and we won't come back till it's over there.
Yeah, now the fun one. Katie, beautiful Katie, you're the only girl that I adore. When the moon shines over the mountain, I'll be waiting at the kitchen door. Katie, beautiful Katie, you're the only girl that I adore. When the moon shines over the cowshed, I'll be waiting at the kitchen door. Now my favorite. What's that? Mademoiselle from Albuquerque, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Albuquerque, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Albuquerque, she hasn't kissed in 40 years. Hinky dinky, parlez-vous? You might forget the gas and shells, parlez-vous? You might forget the gas and shells, parlez-vous? You might forget the crumbs and mills, you never forget the mademoiselle. Hinky dinky, parlez-vous? Ready? Pack up your troubles and your old kid's bag and smile, smile, smile. While you're Lucifer to light your fag, smile with that smile. What's the use of worrying? It never was worthwhile. So pack up your troubles and your old kid bag and smile, smile, smile. Woo! Yeah, you guys did a great job. That was fun. Fun, fun, fun. All right. All right. So, gentlemen, can you tell us where you're from?
Waldeboro, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. So, what made you want to enlist?
Wanted to see the world. That's it.
Want to see
That's
the world.
it. Wanted to get into the action before it was over.
Get the action before it's over. And so, how did you get from Waldeboro? Where did you do your basic training?
Fort Devon.
Uh,
Yep. Fort Devon, Massachusetts.
Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And so, how did you get from this was 1918 or 1917?
1917.
1917. All right. How did you get from Waldeboro and Wisconsin to Fort Devens, Massachusetts? Did you take a bus? What did you do?
We took
Did
the
you hitchhike?
railway. We took the railway up to Augusta. And then from there, we went down to Fort Devens. But first we mustered at Camp Keys in Augusta.
So, when you got to Fort Devens, can you tell us what life was like there?
There's a picture around right there.
Nothing but tents and mud. Yeah. A bit hectic.
A big hectic.
A bit hectic.
Yeah. And so, but didn't you have nice buildings to sleep in and stuff?
Airy, the best airy buildings you can. Tents.
Yes,
Yes.
tents. And so, how long were you in basic training before you shipped overseas?
It was only like a month, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
seemed
only,
like
only
years,
a
but
few,
only
yeah,
like a month.
it was only a few weeks.
A few weeks.
Yeah.
Yes. And so you were excited and
Ready.
Yeah.
Ready to go?
And so, what were you issued? Can you describe your clothes?
Sure.
We were issued a uniform jacket. Underneath, we had just a wool shirt,
Wool.
a t-shirt.
Lots of wool.
Before we had the leggings, the puttees, we had gaiters.
these.
At Fort Devens, we had gaiters like that.
And what were those used for?
They really were to keep your feet and your ankles dry, and because they were incredibly stylish, obviously.
And so, how did you get to France? Did you fly over, or what did you do?
Look a boat.
Oh yeah, I mean it would be nice. Flying would be beautiful, but no, we went down to New Jersey and took a steamer over to France.
Took a steamer.
That's right.
Train to New Jersey.
And how many guys do you think? How many soldiers and stuff were on board ship, roughly?
I believe it was our whole
This
division.
was our whole division.
And what
Well,
division
Yankee
was
division.
that? What was it?
Yankee Division, 26.
Division.
The 26.
Yankee.
Yes.
How many personnel in that division?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember. I didn't see all of them.
Yeah. And so, were many people sick on the way over and stuff?
There were, yeah,
Some
certainly.
died.
Yeah. So, could you show me when you left New Jersey, what were you issued for weapons? What was you issued? Did you?
Certainly. So, as the Yankee Division, who had the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, we were issued with the 1903 rifle. And although most other service members who came from other divisions were also initially issued with this, we were one of the few divisions to actually keep it when we got over to France.
And tell us why. What happened? Why? What's the difference between?
Yes, so during the war, everything was short. Material was short for not just us, but all the countries. So one of the things that the British had initially done was they had hired out to Remington to manufacture this rifle here in their own cartridge. The British decided they didn't really want that, but when we entered the war, we were incredibly desperately short of everything. And so what the federal government decided was it was very easy to rechamber that in the cartridge that the US wanted to use. And so we ended up being, well, many of the divisions ended up being issued that rifle once they got over to France because of shortages with this one.
So, when you landed in France, did you take a tour bus, or what happened next?
More trains.
Yeah, more trains and a lot of walking. A lot of walking.
But they put us in cars too called, what is it, 40 and 8.
40 and 8.
40 men or 8 horses, and not all at the same time.
And so how long were you on a train before you reached your destination?
I don't know how long it
Yeah,
was.
I don't-
A couple hours.
Yeah.
And then they put us up into a barn,
So I want to go back to one thing.
Like
on
the
your
horses.
like the horses, yeah.
Yes.
on your trip from New Jersey, did you go straight to France?
No, we went, we followed the coast for a little bit before going over in a convoy.
We
But
weren't
did
supposed
you
to.
go to Newfoundland?
We did.
Yeah,
We
tell
headed
us,
up.
tell us
headed
why
up
you
the
went to
coast.
Newfoundland on the way. Tell us what happened.
Well, there was some political differences. Initially, I believe it was the 1st Division, the All-American Division, was supposed to go over.
General Patton's division.
The idea being that they were going to take
Persian.
people from
Persian.
all
General
over the United States to go and send. The Yankee Division got a little impatient, and we said we were ready to go. So
Tell us about, what's the Yankee division? Tell us what that was made up of.
yeah, so the Yankee Division, the 26th, was made up of a lot of the New England National Guard, as well as New England Volunteers. So that would have been Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and a few stragglers from Vermont.
Connecticut.
And Connecticut, well, some of it's, yes, so some from Connecticut, some of the Connecticut also went to, I forget the name of the New York Division, but
The 103rd was primarily men from Maine, and we adopted, that's a good way of putting it, men from New Hampshire.
Yes.
They didn't have their own division, so we kind of adopted them. You can come play with us.
yes. And I believe the 102nd Regiment was mostly people from Connecticut and Rhode Island, if I recall.
Yeah.
So, when you arrived at your destination, finally, after you got off the train in France and stuff, what was life like then? What happened?
They bivouacked us into barns, generally, airy, very airy barns, we had bunks 4 high, made of wood and chicken wire. That was what we slept in.
Which is
For
surprisingly pretty
It
comfortable.
wasn't bad.
Yeah.
What time of the year was it?
So this would have been, I think it was November.
That's correct. November.
Yeah.
So it was a cold, yes, but Yankee Division's a hardy souls from the north.
Where in France were you?
Was it right, it was in the quieter part of the front, but I'm
Right.
blanking on the name.
I can't remember the name right
Yeah.
now, but it was in the quieter part. We were horribly, as we arrived, we found we were horribly unprepared for what awaited us. The Germans, the British, the French had been fighting for 3.5 years. They were professionals at it.
Mhm.
Although we had good spirit, we were horribly unprepared as far as uniforms.
Incoming.
It's almost as loud as yours.
And what year was this?
So this was 1917, the fall of 1917.
Where in New Jersey did you leave from, and where did you land in France?
Yeah,
Newark.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Right on the coast, right there on the dock.
Yeah.
New Jersey.
I used to know the name of the steamer, but I don't actually remember.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
So,
Seasick all the time.
so you got the, and you were in the barns and stuff, but you also were issued, weren't you issued, tell us about the packs here.
Yeah, so we also were issued with pop tests, but we certainly used them stateside, but once we got over to France, we didn't really use them at
It
all.
was very wet. They took away our leggings and they gave us the puttees. They're like, those gotta go, those won't work. They took away our campaign hats, Smokey the Bear hat, and they immediately adopted the helmets.
The Brody helmet, the British Brody helmet.
Because that's how unprepared we were.
Yeah.
And so, what did they give you for provisions as far as food? Can you show us some of your?
Most of the time we were off the line. We were fed out of rolling kitchens, just a big mess hall on wheels.
Yep.
And when we got put on the line, we had what was in our haversacks, which was basically 2 rations of bread. This would be one ration as the other of hardtack. And I'll hand it around so we all can enjoy it. You had a tin of bacon that had been there for
A long time.
time then. Coffee on one side, sugar, salt on the other side, the economy can. They had corned beef, one of my favorites actually. Beans were very handy. This was when we were away from our rolling kitchen.
Yes.
Yep.
If you got stuck out in the field, that's what you were gonna be eating. If you were lucky.
If you were lucky. We also had treats, you know, we would have Fig Newtons. Candied ginger was another one of our favorites. But I'll hand some of this around. I have plenty. Everybody should have some.
This is what we would have been issued, basically what was in this is what we would have been issued to drink per day. Not very much, especially if you were marching.
Tell us about the water. How plentiful was it? Water.
Yeah, so, you know, there are a lot of things that you don't necessarily think about once you get into the trenches with everything that's going on until you get in there. And water was a big one. You think of how many people were up at the front lines. You think of how contaminated all that area was after 3 or 4 years of fighting. And you needed a lot of water up there, not just for cooking,
But,
also for drinking.
and you had multiple animals.
Yes.
And to keep them supplied in both
Food and water.
food and water, and so
So-
water was a little scarce.
Water was incredibly scarce. There are accounts of, you know, particularly earlier on in the war with the British and the French, people essentially losing their minds and crawling into shell craters and drinking the water and dying. At that point, what you had in this essentially moonscape there was, you would have bodies that had been decomposing in the water for multiple years. You had the remnants of shrapnel, gas attacks. In particular, one of the nastier elements that you might run across was the remnants of mustard gas. It's called mustard gas,
All
but
right, could you show us, and explain and demonstrate, the gas mask?
I'll let you do the demo. I'll show you.
Your stopwatch? Good.
No.
By the time the gas alarm in the trenches went off, you were already inundated with gas. So you had 6 seconds to put your mask on and to survive. So 6 seconds to die. So basically, you'd hang your helmet. I'm not gonna make it. I'm gonna die. Put this on. Put that back on. There you go. And you would cinch it up tight.
So you can see on the inside of the mask, right, you've got a mouthpiece. This is missing, but you would also have nose clips in there. So this really was not intended as, you know, you couldn't just put this on and breathe, like if anybody's ever worked on their house and used a respirator. You've basically got a scuba connection here that you need to breathe through. And these things, what they would call small box respirators, because in here is a small, literally just a box that's a filter. They're not easy to breathe through.
No, there it is, it's your cartridge right there.
These would fog up. You know, it was an exceedingly unpleasant experience to have to wear one of these.
So if you didn't make the 6 seconds and, or you just couldn't get it out in time, tell us some of the results.
Depending on what type of gas it was chlorine gas, then basically your eyes would, would attack any mucous membrane. So you breathed it in, you would immediately get almost like pneumonia. Because
Your lungs would fill.
Your lungs would fill up full of water. It wouldn't take long. Your eyes, again, with water, you'd go blind temporarily. Your buttons, one of the reasons they knew that they were under a gas attack is that the buttons would, and your rifle would turn black. Because chlorine is caustic, so it reacts with steel and brass and metal. So if your rifle was starting to turn black, your buttons were starting to turn green, something bad was happening. If it was mustard agent, technically you were supposed to put it on and leave, because it's an agent, not really a gas, it's a powder. And it would react with any water on your body.
So if you were sweating,
Right.
your eye, if you got it in your eyes, right? So
Back of your hands period. So you could put this on your face, you could leave, or you'd be protected from your lungs, more or less. But your ears, your neck, your hands would blister up.
And what about your eyes? What would happen to you?
Same thing.
Same
It would
thing.
if it could get on your eyes, it was, you're
And so
blind.
how would you get off the battlefield, or how would you get away? How did you
If the
explain
medic could get to you, if it wasn't too late, they would bandage your eyes, and then you'd see them walk. They'd put a hand on their shoulder. There'd be lines of them.
lines of guys going like that.
And my eyes would be covered.
Oh,
So we just walk, imagine walking through mud, shell holes, barbed wire.
Yep.
So speaking of the barbed wire, tell us what kind of what was the purpose of barbed wire?
Yeah, so barbed wire really was, the concept was a defensive measure, right? There's somebody over in the trench several hundred yards away, and you don't want them sneaking up on you. You don't want them to overwhelm you. So what do? Well, you put out something that slows them down.
They would hang cans of pork and bean cans, stuff off the barbed wire. So if you hit, it's like a bird's nest. With so much of it, was hundreds of yards deep. So if you rattled it, or moved it, it would rattle. And then they just start shooting.
Yeah, and it was, we think of battlefields as being noisy, and they absolutely could be. But at times, it could be just about dead silent.
At nighttime, it could be eerily quiet.
Yes.
So show us the
So this is actually a friend of ours brought this back from France. So this is an original piece of World War I German barbed wire, and you guys can all feel free to come up later and take a look at it. But it is incredibly thick, and so especially earlier on in the war, the British were not given any kind of equipment that would be able to cut through that. And even if you could, frequently wiring parties would be sent out, every day, every night, sometimes multiple times a night. And so several years into the war, you literally had jungles of this stuff. It's really hard to describe or imagine just how deep, how thick. I mean, it was
400 here to the ocean of a field of barbed wire.
and just tangled mass.
Right.
I mean, so it got to a point where the only way to really get through was with artillery.
Or tank.
Or tank.
Tanks.
Eventually the tank
Tanks.
came through, and that was a huge, a groundbreaking element to that. But the artillery, particularly high explosive, was really the only way that they had initially found to try and get through it. And so that would essentially rip up and tear and start to make pathways through the barbed wire.
And it was hit or miss at that, as the British found out
Correct.
in the Battle of the Somme, where they had shelled the Germans for a week, for 7 days, literally 24 hours a day, 7 days.
Yep.
They shelled them.
And so what would you say the landscape was like?
Moon. It was like the moon. There was no vegetation. There were no trees. There are accounts of people literally drowning in mud in wet seasons. I mean, you just couldn't. There would be
Stick
duck
you,
boards.
pull it
but it's-
down.
Yeah. It was hellish.
So tell us about your belt. What's this thing you have, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so, you know, the First World War was kind of the beginning of what we might call modern accoutrements of war. We can see the first, you know, belts that actually have the attachment points that were used for the US military for pretty much ever. I believe they still are. Included with that is kind of this new development in technology of weapons, including semi-automatic handguns, semi-automatic and fully automatic, like man-portable weapons.
Now,
So-
why would you wanna use that? I mean, you've already been issued this. Pick up and show us what you're talking about. with
Right,
the
so-
Automatic weapons.
So that would be the French Chauchat, kind of the grandfather of what you would call an automatic rifle or a light machine gun.
Had a bipod.
Not a very user-friendly weapon, but a very groundbreaking weapon, and doesn't really get the recognition that it probably should, because it was so difficult to use, and it was really kind of the first of its kind. A few years later, in 1917, a famous firearms designer in the United States developed this, which would come to be known as the 1918 Browning automatic rifle. This would end up serving in the US military from the First World War all the way through Vietnam in limited quantities. So this is kind of what we might consider the first kind of recognizable automatic rifle. And this belt is specifically designed to be used with this. Early on in the war, there was a concept of what they called walking fire. And that is essentially where you would take the butt end of this, you would stick it into this cup, and you would walk, fire, walk, fire. You would have an assistant gunner right next to you that would reload, and you would be, although this is capable of full auto fire, you would be basically single shot pulling the trigger. And the concept was to keep the enemy's head down in the trench as you advanced and got closer. And then once you actually got in there, you had enough firepower to hold the trench. Because what they were finding was, sure, you might be able to attack and take a trench, but not long after, the enemy would counterattack and you would lose the trench. And all of that ground gained was for nothing because you had just lost it again.
And they had been doing that for 3.5 years.
Yes,
They would fight over 200 yards of ground,
sometimes even less.
even less.
For those soldiers who were injured, what sort of medical tents or facilities did they have? And what sort of drugs did they use? Because morphine was first discovered around 1800.
Yeah, so that's actually it's something that's not often talked about, but the advancements on the medical side of this war were pretty incredible. If you think about prior to the war, the concept of washing out a wound, particularly with some of these modern, shrapnel wounds where you might be literally disemboweled, right? You might not die instantly, you were gonna die 3 days later from infection. But what we take for granted now in terms of medical cleanliness was cutting edge back then. Doctors would, if you could get back to a field hospital, they would basically take whatever they could, they would flush you out, and then they would repack your intestines and they put in what we would consider a drain nowadays, and sew you back up. And the level of survivability vastly increased. And that is really kind of the cutting edge. This is the turning point where you start actually having people survive for longer periods.
The term pill popper came from World War I, as morphine was in pills. So the medics would come by and give you, if you were shot up or wounded, they would give you a pill.
It was during war that I think they made most medical advancements with just about everything.
Yeah.
From what I've read, in World War I, there was more medical advances made in those 4 years than in all written history beforehand.
Wow.
So, how did the Spanish flu affect your unit?
It was pretty devastating. So as you can imagine, especially with having just gone through a pandemic, right? We understand, larger gatherings can be a place where stuff is easily spread. if you think about the First World War, the number of displaced people, right, the number of people that were traveling, whether it was on a steamer, whether it was on a train, or just congregating together in a trench, the amount of human contact and the lack of hygiene, simply, not even just because it wasn't as well known then, but simply because you just didn't have fresh water, you didn't have any way of cleaning yourself, was pretty devastating, and it created a kind of a firestorm of a pandemic.
I think that the Spanish flu actually, whether they recognize it or not, actually started in 17.
Yes.
Because with the steamships the troop ships taking us over, the air quality was very poor. So we would call it the flu, influenza. So basically you'd get pneumonia and you'd pass away.
Yep.
Can you tell us about the term "over the top"?
Over the top?
Over the top. So obviously we've mentioned trenches here, right? So if anybody's ever been or seen pictures of France or Belgium, there is it's a lot of flat farmland, right? Or the occasional rolling hill. So if you are in an environment where the air is full of steel and you don't really want to be punctured by that steel, you try and get as low as possible. And that oftentimes would mean digging a trench, digging a foxhole. So these things started out as simple foxholes and trenches. By the end of the war, especially by the time we came about, they were incredibly deep, right? So you'd have an 8 or more foot deep trench. You might have what they would call a firing step, so you could step up. You definitely didn't want to stick your head over the top, but they would have basically, I'm blanking on the term, remote binoculars, or you would have a mirror, trench periscope.
So you could look and look over the top.
Right, so most of your life, when you were up at the front, unless it was at night, was lived below that trench parapet. And so when there was an attack that was needed,
They would go over the top, and they would have ladders.
Yep.
And they would blow either that one,
Let's hear it.
so,
or the officers would have this one.
Yep.
And off you'd go. And literally it was, depending on how far away the enemy was, you would die as soon as you went over the top.
Yep.
It would, literally go falling back on your friends.
and
On
they
the
would
ladder.
just send. So this is, again, kind of this turning point in history where we have medical advancements, we have advancements in weapons, but especially at the very beginning of the war, in 1914, you have, the officer corps in the French, basically the French military, just sending waves of people. And you have essentially the Napoleonic era strategy with 20th century technology meant to kill. And it did not go very well.
In 1914, they didn't, the Brody helmet or the Adrian helmet for the French, they didn't have them. They didn't,
Soft caps
They
only.
had soft caps, like a ball cap. So they were, and they found that more people died from artillery fire, shrapnel, than they did actually from rifle fire.
And so the first helmets to really be introduced were actually the French Adrian helmets. And the reason those came about was exactly as Nate had mentioned. They were recognizing that this, falling steel was incredibly deadly and it was causing a lot of the casualties. So they took what at the time were French firefighters' helmets. Same concept, right? Try to protect yourself from falling debris. And from there, eventually the British developed theirs, and the Germans were the last to develop theirs, but in the time that they took to do that, they created what most people would consider the first modern helmet.
Install helmet.
And is really basically used by pretty much every military to this day in one form or another.
So, tell us what the two little doll houses are.
Lanterns.
Folding lanterns.
That's what we would carry with us.
Tell us
And
what they use.
a lot of times, because this pack is ergonomically horrible, it would attach, like his,
Yes.
it's easier to show. It attaches to your ammunition belt, so you cannot access your pack while it's on. Even he couldn't, if I said, Tucker, give me some snacks out of the back, he would,
I
if
would
he
not
opened
be
it
able
up,
to
it
get
would
out of
fall
his pack.
apart.
Right, so, and the term pack is a little bit of a misnomer, right? We think of a backpack where you can reach in, and Nate's got it set up really well over there, but you can see there's no pouch, really.
No, it's a haversack, it's just a folded up piece of cloth.
So, whoop, spoon
Dinner
down.
time.
Dinner
That's why we
time.
don't have nice things.
So you'll oftentimes see, even though, in theory, your belt and your haversack are connected as one to displace the load over your body, it's weird. It is a incredibly forward-thinking design in terms of what the US military was trying to do. You gotta remember when this was developed in 1910, the concept was you are a military that goes out west and is, on the plains. They have to carry everything, they walk everywhere except for the occasional railroad. And so you have to be able to carry everything that you need. The problem is you can't really get to anything except for when you stop for the evening.
And in out west, at that time, they weren't under fire.
Right.
So they would say, okay, everybody would stop for the night, you take your belt off, take your haversack off, and
Disassemble everything, set up your pub tent.
in combat, forget it.
Not great. So what you'll see is pictures of US service members wearing just their belts. They would disconnect their pack and they would wear just their belt. They would go lighter.
They have a French bread bag. French and the Americans they trained us to fight, so they were very good allies.
Yes.
So by 1917, they were running out of supplies. They had been fighting for 3 years. And so we would issue 2 pair of boots when we get over there. And they're like, you have boots. So we would trade them boots. They would get issued their rations in a bread bag. So they would use it and then toss it off, or refill it or whatever. So we were like, we need some of those, just to put your everyday items in.
Yeah.
So we would put our lanterns, if you wanted to see in the trenches, space was a premium at all times. So
That's very clever.
that would fold up and toss it in.
See that shine?
Also,
Yeah.
if you,
How were you organized? Did you have platoons and companies and battalions and brigades?
Regiments and divisions.
Regiments and NCOs and officers?
Yep. It's all, basically all conventional modern military.
I'm gonna ask you one more question, and I'm gonna open it up to question and answers. Go ahead.
well,
Nate,
no,
what was you gonna say?
but in the trenches, anything that the enemy could use to detect where your presence was, they would drop mortars on you or shell you. And so having a fire, having a hot meal, not wise, very unhealthy, as the British would say. So we had sterno, and we had what they called Tommy cookers. Just a little piece, I used a piece of a shell, drilled some holes in it, and then you would put your cup, if you wanted hot coffee, you light it up, put your cup on top, you could put your
Mess.
mess in, you could put whatever as a group, oftentimes, we would share our food, basically our rations. So, because trying to eat a whole can of this, you'll spend all day in the latrine. So you would heat it up, so we'd share amongst us,
Yes.
just to make them last.
So a couple of things, can we, would you be comfortable in passing that, shell around that's on
Absolutely.
on the box?
You want the projectile or the?
Yeah, the projectile.
This is a French 75mm shell,
Yeah.
3-inch shell.
Just
Okay.
pass it around.
Massive, it's heavy, so be careful. It's unfired.
It's like a thermos.
It does.
It does. Let the dog in.
Why
When
were
they-
the American soldiers referred to as doughboys?
Well, there's some debate on exactly where that comes from. Some people think it has to do with the color of the pack, right? Kind of the adobe color, or the fact that we were out in the, basically we were in the punitive expedition almost immediately prior to this, which would have been out in the American Southwest.
We got covered in dust, so
Yeah.
it looked like
Adobe.
It's not derogatory like a Pillsbury doughboy or something.
So,
the average soldier weighed about 120 to 130 pounds.
Yeah.
What did they give you for personal hygiene? I mean, you had to bathe or
Yeah, so,
We have a care kit.
yeah,
They give us,
pretty minimal.
the
But
Red
we
Cross
did
would
have
give
some
us care
stuff.
kits, the YMCA, the Red
How often
Cross.
would you bathe?
You did.
What's that strange word you
Yeah, what are you saying? One of the things that was a little bit unique about the First World War, that the British and Americans were fortunate enough to actually have, was you would be on rotation, right? And it was a short rotation, so it was typically 3 weeks. So first week, you'd be up at the trench, the front line trench. You had to deal with kind of all the horror and the nastiness, the inconvenience. The second week, you would be at the secondary trench, right, a reserve trench. Wasn't quite as dangerous. You could be shelled, but typically it was a much quieter, easier existence. And then the third week, you would be taken off the line completely. And because the war was so static, it didn't take long for you to get, into what was considered civilization. So you could go for a bath, you could go to a restaurant,
But for
you
2
could
weeks,
have your
it's like,
clothes
yeah, no,
washed,
you're not doing that.
right? So there was a little bit of this dichotomy.
And going to the bathroom
Yeah.
was a challenge in its own.
Absolutely.
Now we've ate our food, what comes next?
Yes. So that, you think of, you really can't come off the line to do that. And you imagine that, you also imagine the fact that you are basically fighting over an area that has not moved in 3 years. So not only has everybody else been doing that, but everybody else that had been killed is
Still
in the
there.
same spot.
If they were blown apart, without being
Yeah,
gross,
no.
but they were still there. One thing that the World War I veterans said, whether they were British, German, French, any of them, the one thing they remember most was the smell.
Smell.
Was
Smell.
there outbreaks of like dysentery?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cholera,
Hygiene,
dysentery.
Hygiene was difficult. I mean, you think of like the famous term trench foot, right?
That's where it came from.
It's where it came from. You get, standing, even if you had a nicer trench that had what we would call duck boards, right? So wooden slats that allow you to stay up over the bottom, over the mud down below, those would frequently get rained out. And so you would be standing in wet conditions for days. Sometimes if it happened to be a really rainy time of year, you would be wet for literally 2 weeks.
Yep.
And you had one uniform.
The
So
British
that's
discovered
it.
that with the puttees on
Yep.
our legs, it reduces your blood circulation. So in 1914, 1915, they literally discovered this almost by accident, where soldiers would unwrap their legs and take their boot off, and there were nothing but bones sticking in there. I mean, literally, their foot had rotted off. So it was part of their regiment. They made an oil, a topical oil they were to put on, and it was meant to be every day.
Yes.
So they would dig holes in the sides of the trenches, anything to
Try and get out of the rain.
get out of the rain, get out of the water,
wet.
get out of the shell fire. Even in a trench, shrapnel can still find you. So they would dig holes in the sides of these, and then they would take the puttees off, take the boots off, rub their legs down, which would redo the circulation, get the circulation going again. They wouldn't have dry socks, so they put the socks back on,
Yeah.
and then
If you were lucky, you had a spare pair that you were drying around your neck. If you weren't lucky, then you didn't have anything. You put the wet socks back
you
on.
go find some literally stiff that didn't
Yeah.
need them anymore.
Yeah.
Back then, did they utilize tourniquets like they do nowadays?
Yep.
Yeah, they would.
They had tourniquets?
They had tourniquet, yeah.
Nate,
They,
Nate,
what?
tell them how my grandfather had so much in,
Her grandfather was shot twice, once at the Battle of Seicheprey, and he was shot through the foot. The Germans, again, they'd been fighting for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. And so the Germans learned that we'll aim our machine guns at about 16 inches off the ground. So even if you threw yourself on the ground, the first thing you do is pick your head up.
Yeah.
And you would catch one in the forehead.
Yeah.
So her grandfather was shot in the foot. Second place he got shot was in the Battle of Chateau Thierry, and he was shot in the intestines, and he kind of rolled into a ditch, and medics brought him back, they put 7 feet of silver tube in his intestines. So, and he lived until his 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
So one last,
7 feet of it.
one last thing. How, tell us how you guys were received when you came home.
Like a hero's welcome. Although a lot of us didn't come back until 1920 or 1919.
We came back by probably 1990, early 1919. They brought us home.
But we didn't go home as soon as the war ended. In 1918, we didn't.
But it was a couple months after, which was, figure, it's only November when it ended. So it was December, January, February, they sent us home.
And some of us did end up going in and occupying Germany.
Yep.
We functioned as essentially a police force there to stabilize.
A lot of the Americans, French and British, did
Yep.
that.
Yep.
The Americans got
any
along with
sort
the
of
Germans
mail
very
system?
well, because a lot of the Germans were part of the New England area.
Yes.
So
yeah.
we got along
So
with them
now,
very well.
I'll open it up to questions. Sandy,
What do they serve you for food in the field kitchens?
In the field kitchens, we would have several delightful things. One was called slumgullion, which was anything they could throw in a pot with noodles. Canned peaches was always a delectable thing. What else? Bread, jelly, grape jelly,
Bread, bacon was
bacon, hash,
very popular.
hash by the truckload.
Yes, anything that was cannibal and easily transportable and easily cookable.
They made bread literally, not even figuratively, literally by the truckload, and they would bring it up close to the front lines, and then literally dump it on the side of the road. So you'd have this mountain of round bread. So you'd go find one that wasn't quite so mildewy, and the rats hadn't eaten it, because the rats were everywhere.
Yeah.
Remember, rats, mice, rodents, everywhere. So you'd find one. You dig through it, you'd find one, stick it in your bread bag, and then tear it off, share it with your friends, because you're always sharing with your squad.
Yes.
You're
Dawn.
with-
By 1917, most of these horrors must have been known generally by the public. How do you suppose you got volunteers to do that?
Most of the horrors really weren't known by the public.
That's
Over here.
No?
Not over here.
No,
And even in the British,
it wasn't talked about.
the British were very good on censoring
Yeah.
everything.
You gotta the public perception of what war was has changed a lot in the last 40 to 50 years. In the early 20th century, it just was not, it wasn't recognized, it wasn't talked about, and it was intentionally kept from the public.
That's why I said in the beginning of all this, when you said, what did I feel like?
Yeah,
I'm ready
why'd
to go.
I go over?
That's, I wanna get
see the
involved
world.
in it before it ends, because
Right.
that's where the glory is. I wanna get
Yeah.
involved in it.
oh yes, bend the back.
Can you say something about the United States Marine Corps at Belleau Wood?
I can't speak to that just because I'm not as familiar with that. I don't, Nate, I don't know if
Not
you're
wrong.
as,
I know they were there first, and then when the 26th, 103rd specifically, relieved them after they pulled off London in Bellewood. That's
yeah, that's
they
about
fought
as-
hard, they were awesome, they
Yeah.
did great. It was an awful fight.
Yes, Miss Houston.
So at the end, when you guys came back, did you think what it was all for?
I mean, there was definitely a recognition of, wow, let's not do that again. This was kind of like the very first time, right? And if you, there was a lot of participation from the people of Maine, both in terms of people going over, in terms of monetary support, and in terms of material sent as well. And so when you drive around Maine, it is pretty common to see monuments that are they just list the Great War or the World War, right? A lot of people came back from that, and they realized, we cannot do this again. And that was where the precursor to the United Nations really came from.
The League of Nations.
The League of Nations. It did not succeed, but that was the concept behind it.
And
Joseph, you're next.
hold on 1 second, just to finish that. By the 30s, the World War I vets in America were very disgruntled, because they could literally see, why did we do what we did? When at the armistice, the Americans were not invited to the armistice train in Versailles. There's the British, the French, we were ignored. So that was a little bit of a heartburn
Yes.
with us. And Truman, he had laid out like his 12
The
points.
plan,
The
yeah.
plan, and they ignored it. So by the 30s, as the Nazi regime was building back up, we were like, did we not tell you?
One of the things the U.S. when we got involved at the end of the war and really insisted on was not being punitive towards the towards the Germans and the Austrian
Central Powers.
Yes, thank you.
The
Yeah.
Central Powers, not
The
the
Central Powers. And we were not listened to on that fact. And so between that and plenty of other factors that played into it, basically things just continued to get worse in Europe after the First World War.
Joseph.
Were you allowed to communicate with your family via mail, either to receive or to send?
Yeah.
Yes.
But only in a very censored fashion.
So
Yeah.
it was censored.
Everything that we wrote was censored, everything that they would write
Would be
would be
censored.
censored.
You were next, and then Sandy.
I'm assuming that the trenches, you had to dig them yourself. I think I saw
Some of
a
them.
couple.
Yeah, unless you were lucky enough to move into one that somebody else had done for you.
The
How
British,
did
the
you
French,
do that? I mean,
No?
how did you, it must have taken forever to do
let
it.
me show you.
Yeah. You didn't get a lot to do it with.
Not get shot at the same time?
Oh no, you were definitely getting shot at the same time.
Yeah.
And you said you dropped your pack when you went up out of the trenches to fight.
Oftentimes,
You
yeah.
dropped your pack. Where'd you drop your pack and how'd you fight?
Yeah. You often so if you knew that you were going over the top, you were bringing your pack with you, because if you got stuck over there, you didn't have food, you didn't have
That was your rations. So
that basically was your emergency.
right, so you brought your pack with you in some fashion. We learned quick
Back
that
out of here, but
we couldn't carry, it was very heavy to carry our tent, our rain jacket, our tent, our blanket, and everything with us. So we quickly picked through the
essential.
essentials, that's a good word, brought them with us. We brought food with us. Somebody might bring, again, remember, the squad is very tight. So somebody might bring, their shelter half with them. Somebody else might bring a rain jacket. Somebody else might bring 3 or 4 blankets. So everybody carried something, and you would share it,
Yeah.
Misery loves company, and there was a lot of misery.
So you had a tent for emergencies and stuff.
Yeah,
But-
so
But once your company got to a place where you stayed for a little while, did they have big tents and stuff for you to?
If they pulled us back offline, they put us
Right.
back in the barns
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
but typically, I mean
Once we got
Or did
moving
you just
forward in
sleep in the
open
trenches?
warfare,
you were sleeping in the trenches. Sometimes they try and use a shelter half, kind of as cover, but these they're not waterproof. So the best they do is they kind of redirect water, right? It's a little bit like if you've ever been in a modern tent that's seen its better days, right? And you touch the side of it and you can feel that it's wet. It wicks the water through. Well, these are even worse. So
and as the Americans got moving forward, we Pershing was very adamant on not fighting a stagnant war. He saw how well it worked for the British, the French, and the Germans.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, we're not doing this. He wanted specifically what he called open warfare, which is to get out of the trenches and push them back.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we slept in foxholes.
absolutely.
We slept in holes in the ground. We'd have like I said, 5 or 6 of your friends,
Yeah.
dig a big hole, and do your best.
Yeah.
Sandy.
Those tools you have in your hands are commonly used for weapons.
Yep.
Yes.
And what I was going to say before that was the feelings of the soldiers in the community after the war led to the isolation that we experienced as a country prior to World War II,
That's correct.
which the Japanese helped us get over.
Yeah.
That was the bitterness that we felt towards the European countries after World War I, especially into the 30s where we were very isolated. We were like, we helped you, we helped end, this is the right word, World War I. And yet here we are again on
Right.
the verge of another one.
Yeah.
All for nothing.
Yes.
All for nothing.
And so there was
did they do with deserters?
The Zooters, like the,
Deserters.
deserters, they were shot.
They were shot.
Yeah.
There was no
Some
jail.
summarily executed.
Yeah, there was no jail time. If you were found guilty of desertion,
Yeah.
you were just taken and shot.
The problem with that was many of them were deemed shell shocked,
Yes.
which we would call today.
Yeah, they were literally just
Yes,
incapable of
yes.
fighting anymore.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't know what shell shock was.
Yes,
So just going back to the rifles from the very beginning, the rifles that the British issued you, were those Enfields?
So,
Then,
yeah, so these were what would commonly be called like American Enfields or M1917 Eddystone rifles. They were actually issued to us by the U.S. The U.S. had them made. They basically had them, the manufacturing line modified to fire the U.S. Cartridge. However, there were U.S. units.
Two divisions that
Yep.
went to the British, and they had to give up their Springfields.
And they were actually issued British SMLE, like British rifles,
British
they were
rifles.
British ammunition.
They were unhappy.
They were not enthusiastic about that change.
yes,
I was wondering if sulfur drugs played into the medical on the.
Yeah, I believe the sulfa powder was kind of the topical antiseptic,
Yeah.
right? Penicillin, any kind of antibiotic, none of that existed.
Yeah.
And wouldn't exist for, like another 15 to 20 years, because I don't think it came around till like 41 or
That's
42.
correct. They had a huge problem in the war because the British and the French and the Central Powers found out that when you're dealing with gas agents, remember it's everywhere now. It's in the ground. It's on your clothing.
Yep.
So if you get wounded or like you said, shrapnel hit where
Right.
it disembowels you, you get the ground. You get the infection in you, and so there was a specific name that the British discovered for it. Was sort of like a mild acid they had to use to wash the mustard agent out of your body.
Yeah.
So, or it would just kill you.
Right.
They call it gas gangrene. Your body would rot apart.
Yeah.
we have time for one more question.
If you slept outside at night, what were the temperatures like?
It totally varied, right? So, kind of central France.
Similar to this.
Yeah.
Similar to Maine.
But-
It could be 20 below. It
Yeah.
could be 80.
Yeah.
Dawn, go ahead, and I'll excuse you.
Did you guys get benefits when you got home? GI
We
Bill
were
type?
promised benefits, but we did
Yeah, I
not
don't
get
think we got them. I don't think that the commonality of that did not come around until after the Second World War, if I recall correctly.
So one last thing, anybody want me to try any candied ginger? No. Big nuisance.
So, the gentleman is gonna be here for a few more minutes, so you can come up and talk to them and look the display over. But,
One last thing, when we talked about gas masks.
yes,
This was the British model of a gas mask.
Yep.
And early in the war, was it 1915?
Yeah.
When the
They
Germans
first
first
experienced
used
it, yeah.
chlorine gas, there was no defense against it. The French quickly made one. It was called, I cannot remember it. M2. I can't remember what it
Yeah,
was. Well, basically, this is their version, their early version, mind you, of a gas mask. Okay, so they would put it on, and there you go. Now, it had a chemical agent in the back that would reacted with ammonia, so it would nullify the chlorine gas. Well, what on your body creates ammonia? Urine. So you had to drop trow in the middle of the gunfight, pee on it, and then stick it on your face.
Just in case it already wasn't unpleasant enough.
It wasn't gross enough already.
Yeah.
well, Nate, Tucker, thank you very much for coming. Absolutely great job, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And they'll be here, so thank you all for coming, and come up and look the stuff over, and